with green dots. Look at that. So you can use that or this, doesn't matter. All right, let's turn our attention up here, please.
All right, so I have a chapter speaking on the parting of the East and West. So this was an end to the cultural unity. So the Arab conquest of North Africa in the late 7th century completed the collapse of what had once been the intellectual powerhouse of Latin Christianity. Ever since the 3rd century, the African church had produced the majority of the outstanding thinkers in the Western tradition. Even after the death of Augustine in 430 and the Vandal conquest, Africa had continued to produce writers of high intellectual stature. The restoration of imperial rule over Africa in 533 by Justinian had proved to be a mixed blessing as far as the church was concerned. The emperor's condemnation of some of the works of 3 5th century theologians was resisted in various parts of the empire and beyond because it was regarded as a denial of the authority of the council of 451. This generated a new division in the church known as the dispute over the 3 chapters. So the 3 chapters. So the 6th century theological controversy over the 3 chapters, which was centered on the nature of Christ, provoked one of the most serious and long-lived religious schisms of the early Middle Ages. The fault lines ran not only between the Byzantine imperial court, but between Rome and the churches in the former Western Empire's successor states. In Italy, the schism endured into the 7th century, and the repercussions were felt long thereafter. The tensions revealed the growing political as well as cultural divide between Byzantine Rome and the West. Some of the Africans who disputed the emperor's right to change theological orthodoxy by imperial will led the resistance and wrote works in defense of the views of the condemned author challenging Justinian. And then over there in the image is Justinian on the right with his, in the middle, alongside with the council in regards to the chapters. So Constantinople, Latin became increasingly to be associated with the barbarians who were the political masters of most parts of the former Western Empire, and its use declined accordingly. In the past, the level of learning in the West was measured primarily on the basis of individual authors' knowledge or often lack of knowledge of Greek. The ignorance of Latin in the East is not seen as equally regrettable. So Rome between Constantinople and Francia. The first serious divide within the fabric of the Mediterranean world was between North and South and was caused by the Arab conquest. The succession of demoralizing military defeats and the theological challenge that Islam seemed to present caused a series of dramatic reassessments within the Eastern Roman Empire, not only of strategy but also the nature of the relationship between God and man. The effects of this, together with the decline in the empire's ability to play a significant military role in the defense of the West against a still expanding Arab empire, led to breaking down of the ties that bound together the Christian world. Other theological disputes, allied to a real divide in religious sensibilities, had by this time also produced a fundamental rift between East and West elsewhere in the Christian Mediterranean. The effects of the developments in the empire in the West were considerable. In the late 7th century, the emperors dominated the church in the imperial territories and could depose and appoint the patriarchs of Constantinople at will. The effects of the developments in the empire in the West were considerable. In the late 7th century, the emperors dominated the church in the imperial territories and could that's the same thing. It's a typo. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Well, we have growing divide, like you say, between East and West. And part of that is, as you also mentioned, the idea that the West had been taken over by pagans, right? And Justinian has been fighting. We talked about this in an earlier presentation. He's been fighting even in Italy. He's been trying to restore the Roman Empire. To do that, he's fought a series of battles against the Arian Christians that we talked about. And who was it did that presentation about the battles?
Which battles?
Oh, maybe that was...
I think it was Adrian.
Yeah, Adrian. But those battles, of course, have taken their toll on any good relationship between them. But yeah, increasingly, like you're saying, the West is seen as being connected to Arian Christianity, and that the East now is really, the center of it is there. Constantinople has not been taken over. It's still there. It's very powerful. So economically, politically, it's now the center. And of course, Justinian has actually been physically sending out troops to attack and try to recapture territory. So none of this is, building up a good relationship. And eventually there will be there's already growing theological divides, because there's political divide, and then there's theological divides. They have to do with the person and nature of Christ, and a slightly different interpretation of how Jesus, the Son, God the Son, and God the Father interact, and what their exact relationship is. All right, go ahead.
That was it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question though.
Sure.
So did this lead to the Great Schism of 1054?
It leads to it. It's not there yet. It's not there yet, obviously, in time period. But the division between East and West was growing, and it was already sort of there, but it wasn't official.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't official till 1054.
Okay.
But this kind of stuff that you're talking about, it is going to lead to that divide in 1054.
Okay.
But I think most people would believe that the division really between them had already happened, like this time, Justinian, which is much earlier, and it just continues to grow.
Okay.
But officially in 1054 then, which is, beyond this chapter, beyond our time period here, officially that's when there's kind of an official excommunication of each other. It's like the West, the Church in Rome, the Pope says, these guys aren't really Christians, or they're certainly not with us. And then in the East they say the same thing. And by the way, that division is still there today, in many regards. Because other smaller issues come up. What we might consider, the person of Christ, I think, is a major theological issue. But then other things, for example, how do you determine when is Easter? That becomes a very visible division. When is Easter? In the East, that is in the Orthodox Church, for example, in the West, we celebrate Christmas on December 25th, right? Doesn't matter what day of the week. So it could be a Sunday, it could be a Monday, it doesn't matter. December the 25th. In the East, they celebrate the day of Easter on a precise date. It doesn't have to be a Sunday. Okay? Because they're going by the lunar calendar, it's kind of going by the Passover calendar, and then they determine it in that way. So it's very rarely on a Sunday. And when it is on a Sunday, it's usually not on the same Sunday as the West. In fact, we had it on the same Sunday, I was thinking about 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. And I can remember some people coming out with an article saying, okay, now, for the first time in I don't know how many years, 200 years or something, 150 years, we're going to have Easter in the West, and the East is going to fall on the same exact day. And they're saying, here's our chance now for reconciliation, and the East and the West can get back together, because now Easter is on the same day. It's on a Sunday, and it's actually on the same Sunday. And I thought, reading that, I thought, no, what's going to happen next year? Who's going to change? And there's lots of other issues besides that, but that was one of them. Another issue that divided them that was growing during this period was what is it that priests should do? In other words, in the West, it had been developed that a priest should be celibate, right? Have no wife, have no children, have no family. In the East, that was not the case. Priests did get married, they did have families. Now, I think to have a higher office like a bishop, the bishop was not married. So, you could kind of choose if you're going to be a priest. If you ever had aspirations, I guess, of being a bishop or whatever, moving up, then you wouldn't get married. But most of them were married. So that's another issue. There's a lot of issues like that are different, slightly different. And several of them are theological as well. And I think the theological ones are harder to overcome than the other. But the Easter thing becomes the most visible because everybody, even if they don't know much about it, they can say, oh, well, you celebrated Easter, like a week ago, and we celebrate it now, or 10 days ago, whatever. Why is that? Why don't we agree? And so there's a lot of issues like that they don't agree on. And of course, one of them also develops is the authority of the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, as being the superior bishop of all bishops, basically. Therefore being what we call the Pope. They don't accept that either in the East. So all those things are developing. Yeah. Any other questions for us? All right, let me go ahead and take a break for a second and let me load your other one here.